Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, I don't want to stand in the middle of the blinding light. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Teresa Moran, and I'm the director of the Food Studies team here at Ohio University. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today and the luminary, Athens luminary, who will be introducing our speaker today. So this opens our fall 2017 speaker series, and we're very, very fortunate today to have Michelle Ajamian from Shagbark to introduce our guest speaker, Grace Gershuny. So we will also have here opportunities to purchase Grace's book, The Organic Revolutionary. We will also have an opportunity to continue the conversation with Grace in two venues. Today at 7 o'clock, we'll be showing the film Food Evolution, How GMOs Can Feed the World. And Grace has graciously agreed to be on a panel discussion following that film. The panel will be moderated by Bob Colvin from Biological Sciences. And then also tomorrow morning, we're having a community conversation about organic farming and Grace's experiences in developing regulations and regulatory environments for the USDA at the Village Bakery between 9 and 10:15 tomorrow morning. So we invite you to participate in both of those events. Everything is free. So I will turn it over to Michelle to introduce our speaker today.
Hi. I've never been called an luminary before. I must say, that's a little daunting. Well, I'm excited to be able to introduce Grace, and because of her work around climate change and how her work in organic agriculture led her to that. So I want to tell you a few things about her. Her long history in the organic food movement is marked by how she helped make the grassroots organic movement the engine for what became our federal organic standards in 1990. Starting out organizing the still thriving Newport, Vermont Farmers Market in 1975, her work with the Northeast Organic Farming Association, you might know that as NOFA, as a volunteer and staff in the 70s and 80s, coalesced with her development of their first organic certification program in 1977. She was on the original staff of the USDA's National Organic Program, where she was the principal author of the first proposed rule. And I'll add now maligned proposed rule, and maybe Grace will speak to that. Grace is a faculty member and current board member with the Institute for Social Ecology. She has taught about all aspects of agriculture and food system issues over 25 years in low residency and individualized bachelor's and master's programs through Goddard, Burlington, Prescott, and Green Mountain colleges, as well as a few years at Sterling College. She has written extensively on soil management and composting, including co-authoring The Soul of the Soil, still in print from Chelsea Green. Soon her work on revising and updating the Rodale Book of Composting will be available. Last year, Grace self-published Organic Revolutionary, a memoir of the movement for real food, planetary healing, and human liberation. Her master's is from the University of Vermont in Extension Education with a self-designed concentration in ecological agriculture. Her owner-built home in Barrett, Vermont, in the banana belt of the Northeast Kingdom, confirms she's walking the talk about how to live low on the grid. What really interests me, and I hope the rest of us, is how her 40 years of work in the food systems has led her to become more deeply engaged in climate justice. She knows how organic agriculture can avert climate catastrophe. And here in Appalachia, we know what fossil fuel extraction means up close and how it has long been sold to the people of our region as good jobs and a righteous contribution to the industrial might of our country. Yet many of us miss how fossil fuels have their greatest impacts in the growing and distribution of grains and beans. GMOs and chemical-rich grains chemical rich. Yeah. And beans are primary contributors to climate change and a host of other impacts to our soil, water, and health. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Teresa, and the food studies theme. I just learned a little bit more about what a great offering that is here. I think it's a fabulous opportunity. You guys are really lucky to have that opportunity to study so cross-disciplinary, and it is a very cross-disciplinary subject. And I also want to give a special thanks to my friend and colleague Lisa Trokia-Balkitz, did I say that right? Who was in the first cohort of master's students at Green Mountain College when we started out that program, and we became fast friends, and Lisa has become an incredibly valuable player in this whole game, and came out to Columbus and picked me up at the airport too. So thank you, Lisa. And I also like to acknowledge whenever I give a talk someplace, to acknowledge the first peoples of this region. And the native peoples, I understand the Shawnee were part of the original inhabitants and the mound builders, and I just want to thank those people for sharing their space with us settler folk. So I'd like to get a little bit of a sense of who's here. I know that most of you are probably associated with the food studies program. Who is a student here? Can you raise your hand? Great, and so there's quite a few of you who aren't students here. That's fabulous too. Really appreciate you venturing into the halls of academe for this event. How many of you do any gardening or growing or farm work? That's pretty good, about half maybe. I assume that, you know, is there anybody here who doesn't really particularly pay much attention to where your food comes from?
Where are they?
Okay, just checking. How many of you consider yourselves food system activists? Okay, and how many of you are really deeply concerned, scared maybe, despairing maybe about climate chaos and what's going on? Yeah. So this is part of what motivates me to get out and leave my paradise in northeastern Vermont and go around the country. I haven't done that much around the country, but you know, I've been around a bit, and try to get people motivated to understand that there is hope, that there is a way to address the issues of climate change and a whole bunch of other things that would be nice to address. And you know, I want to give a little bit of background. I mean, Michelle's introduction sort of made it unnecessary for me to go into much detail about why I wrote the book that I wrote, which I self-published last year, and which kind of tells a story that contradicts a lot of the common knowledge about how USDA stole organic and watered down the standards and all of this sort of thing. So that's part of why I wrote the book. But another part of why I wrote the book is because I began to understand that people don't necessarily get all of those connections between climate and the food system. And, you know, the organic industry today is what? It's close to $50 billion industry in this country. And I just recently saw some updated statistics about that. But that little seed that we nurtured in the 70s and 80s, which was planted probably more like 100 years ago, has really sprouted and grown and begun to turn green, you know, literally. And yet there are limits to the marketplace ability to really make the changes that we need fast enough. And so that's kind of one of the conundrums that we face. So while there's this immense success of the organic label, and I'm very proud of the role that I've played in bringing that about, you know. I also see the limitations of it, and now there are many other labels that have sprouted from organic, and I'm sure you all know what some of them are and are thoroughly confused and maybe skeptical about a lot of them. The most recent thing is one called Regenerative Organic, which is being promulgated by the Rodale Institute, which is a venerable institution, which I think very highly of. And they also are looking at a market-based label for a regenerative product that that they say will, the standards, and I haven't looked at the standards yet, they've been circulating the draft standards for public review, but that's kind of next on my agenda, is to look at those standards and see what I think of them. It is theoretically aimed at rewarding farmers who actually build soil organic matter, who actually work to reduce the climate footprint of agriculture, even though they may not be qualified for the certified organic label. And you know, I could talk a great deal about the ins and outs of those questions, but one of the things that I do think is important about the rise of the organic industry is the fact that there is now this mass education program out there. This education program that, you know, there's that little green and white sticker on all kinds of products, all kinds of very familiar products to many people in this country. And one of the things I am very much get on my high horse about sometimes is that I don't like to talk about people as consumers, you know. I think that talking about people as consumers is the wrong approach, that people are human beings first and citizens in terms of their power in politics and in self-organizing and in creating their own arenas for control of their own necessities of life. And that's really one of the primary important things. But that little message, that little two-word message, which I've decided I call the message on a bottle, which what it does is tells people that, well, you know, you can have anything you want, any familiar product that you want without those terrible effects on farm workers from the toxic substances that they have to deal with, without the possible toxic substances that may remain in the food, the poor quality food, et cetera, et cetera. Which is not to say that all organic products are the best things in the world nutritionally. There's lots of organic junk food out there on the market. There's no question about it. But what it tells you, it starts a chain of potential journey of reflection along a road that says, well, why is the rest of the food system, why do we need that stuff? Why do we need GMOs? Why do we need pesticides and herbicides and petrochemicals and so on and so forth? Why do we have to pollute, trade off polluted water? Why do we have to trade off loss of biodiversity in order to have enough food to feed everybody? So, and I think you know what my answer to that is. We don't. I was going to read a piece of my prologue, but I think you guys don't really need to hear that, the motivating piece. Well, maybe I will. I'm just going to read the opening where I'm setting the scene for what my life is like and why I'm doing this. And this was written in the summer of 2015. You always write the prologue as the last thing that you write. So here it is. While drought devastates the nation's salad bowl in California, this has been a very rainy season in Vermont. Our 40-odd heirloom apple trees are heavily laden, and a couple of large limbs have actually broken under the weight of the ripening fruit. The garden is bursting with tropical lushness, and it took until mid-July for our neighbor to find enough dry days in a row to hay our field. Flowers are blooming wildly, buzzing with pollinators. Our 5 hens give us all the eggs we can use or give away, with yolks deep yellow from the weeds and bugs they eat, along with the food scraps we deposit in the chicken yard, while commercial egg supplies are squeezed by the outbreak of avian influenza that has decimated mega poultry farms in the Midwest. And they've since recovered, but the conditions that caused that outbreak are still there. I feel grateful and privileged to live here, surrounded by such beauty in every season, confident in the bounty that pours out of the earth to nourish us. Growing older, I'm heartened by younger generations of farmers and gardeners, builders and tinkerers, smart people with the skills to stay warm and well-fed through this region's long and bitter winters. Taking stock of the great blessings life has brought me, I can assure you that the story you are about to read has a happy ending, at least for its protagonist. The rest of the world, well, that's another matter. It seems that despite the best efforts of many of us of the boomer generation, the situation, whether environmental, social, economic, or political, I wrote this 2 years ago, right? Seems to become scarier by the month. Though we who live in this rural paradise count ourselves fortunate, we fear for the future of our children and grandchildren, for the refugees risking their lives to flee brutal wars, for the island dwellers who watch the seas rise and threaten their homes, and for the many who live in drought-stricken areas where water is no longer a given. We cringe as the oil rigs wend their way to the Arctic, soon to be devoid of summer sea ice. We join climate marches, protest against oil pipelines and fracking around here, yay, install solar panels, and support our local farmers. We get involved in politics, work to raise public awareness, and proclaim that Black Lives Matter. And we pray that our efforts have not been too little, too late. So that's kind of the introduction to what's in store if you read this book. So I'm going to go on to some of the slides, and I don't have words on the slides. Let's see, I do it this way, there we go. But I like this, a lot of people are familiar with this slide, this cartoon. And it kind of sums up the big picture for me a lot. And of course, the climate deniers don't want to hear about, oh, Agenda 21 is some kind of conspiracy to take over the world government. How many people have heard that one? There's a lot of very bizarre thinking out there. But the fact is that all of the things that we're motivated to get, all the things that we want, are what are going to make the world better, not just for the climate, but for all of these other aspects and all of these interrelated aspects. There's a popular academic term called intersectionality. I'm sure you've all heard it. And I find that I don't like to use words like that when I go out and speak in public, but essentially it's all connected. That's what it means. It's all connected. Politics, racism, and I get into a great deal of discussion in my book and in my life in general about the connection between our racist underpinnings of our food system and our whole economy. And that's another piece. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this. This is something I just found. There's this newly released report called Unraveling the Food Health Nexus. And it had a whole bunch of neat graphics, but it really puts health at the center of the whole equation. And so, planetary healing is important in order to have individual healing or social healing. And it's all part of the same thing. So up there you see that the food system as it is, 30% of the foods of greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to the food system. And that is, I think, a conservative estimate. I've seen it as high as half, close to half. And most estimates I see say it's maybe, it's second only to energy. And of course, there's a lot of energy that it goes into the food system. So some of that food system attribution, you can't really separate them out that perfectly. But the effects of climate change on health are, it's a little hard to see. Those are small types, but they're, increased livelihood stresses, changing food, drought risks, natural disasters, yield loss, and reduced nutrition crop value, increased exposure to chemical contaminants. I mean, just think about what happened in Houston and all of the chemicals released in the flooding there. And that reduced nutrition crop value, that's maybe a bit controversial, but I just recently saw a study that purported to show that increased carbon dioxide, which makes crops grow faster because that's what they consume, right? Plants consume carbon from the atmosphere through the miracle of photosynthesis and turn it into carbohydrates in their bodies and proteins and all of the other building blocks of life. And so more carbon dioxide means more plant growth. Well, the study that I saw, and I don't have it in front of me. That's one of the few studies I didn't bring with me, so I was pawing through the documentation for all of this. But essentially, it showed that increased growth was led to what you would call less nutrient density in the crops. So lower mineral content, lower vitamin content, lower protein and fat content in the crops that had higher CO2 exposure. And they did this through a controlled study where they actually covered over a field and precisely controlled the amount of the concentration of CO2 around the plants that were growing there, and did these measurements. So it was very interesting to see that. Well, we'll go on. This is a graphic from the organization GRAIN. How many of you have encountered this? It's based in Barcelona. It does a lot of really great work on the global south in particular, and things like land grabs and corporate global trade and things like that. And what's interesting about this is that, you know, the whole thing about food miles, and people believe that, well, if we have our local food, and I'm definitely a proponent of local food as much as possible, local control of one's necessities of life is a foundational belief of mine. But that the transportation is really not the biggest part. And actually, transportation, if you take out the processing, packing, and retail, transportation is like only less than 10% of the responsibility for climate change. So the argument that by buying local we're necessarily doing a good thing for the climate is a little bit shaky. And in fact, sometimes the local transport is less energy efficient than long distance transport, just because, you know, smaller vehicles consume more per unit of transport. So that's a thing to think about. But the thing that I think is really interesting is that, well, agricultural production, land use change, and deforestation are important. And the agricultural production, I think, is primarily what they're referring to are things like tillage that releases carbon out of the soil. Other non-food related emissions, what the hell does that mean? Well, I think, and I'm pretty sure what it means, is all of the farm inputs that are used, okay? And I do have some statistics about that I have on here, so I'm going to just, and there's several things that I have about that, because I really think that that's one of those places that we need to learn more. Well, I lied. I don't have that on here. There is a statement that, well, nitrogen fertilizer is the one that I talk about the most. Nitrogen fertilizer accounts for anywhere from 5 to 10% of the share of greenhouse gas emissions from those other of the whole food system, not just in that half of it, but the whole food system. And there was a great statistic that I found. Yeah. Does anybody know what the process is that's done to produce nitrogen fertilizer? It's called the Haber-Bosch process. It was invented by a couple of Germans pre-World War I think probably the late 19th century. And it's a way of using a large amount of energy. Generally, in this day and age, it's coming from natural gas to make nitrogen come out of the air and become ammonia. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. The bacteria in the soil and on plant roots can do that without using a lot of natural gas, but that's another question. According to one source I saw, 3 to 5% of the world's natural gas production, 3 to 5% of the world's natural gas production is used for this purpose. Now, more than nitrogen fertilizer is made with this process, and actually what it was originally developed for was to make explosives. And you know, the story I like to tell is how the first revolt against chemical agriculture came after World War I, when Rudolf Steiner gave the Silesian farmers some advice about what to do to restore living qualities to their soil. And what they had noticed was that after World War I, when there was all of these stockpiles of explosives and nobody to sell them to anymore, they decided they had the idea. They remembered that some guy had figured out that, you know, very soluble nitrogen applied to the soil makes plants grow really well. So they decided to sell all of that stuff to farmers. And it was a big hit for a long time for those farmers tired of shoveling out the manure and carting it off to the fields. You know, it really gave some great results. But some farmers noticed that, you know, things aren't looking as good as they used to, and we're having problems with our livestock. Anyway, so that was the advent of synthetic fertilizers, really. There were some other ones, other nutrients being used before that, but the other thing about that nitrate fertilizer, besides the fact that it's a huge energy hog, is that it releases something called nitrous oxide when it is spread in too large a quantity and left exposed to the air. Nitrogen naturally wants to be in a gas, and so it's spread in a solid or sometimes liquid form, as ammonia may be injected directly into the soil, which is a horrendous thing to do. At any rate, it will volatilize, it will go off into the atmosphere as nitrous oxide. It's not the only source of nitrous oxide. Any high nitrogen soil amendment, even a natural one, will release a certain amount of nitrous oxide, but it's generally not over-applied at the way that synthetic nitrates are. And nitrous oxide is approximately 310 times as potent a greenhouse forcer as carbon dioxide. So some of what I've seen has said, where is that one? I have a little factoid about how much of the greenhouse emissions coming from agriculture are attributed strictly to nitrous oxide emissions. I actually wrote this down, so where the heck did I put it? Oh, here it is. Production, transport, and use of synthetic nitrogen. That's the whole megillah, the whole production end of that, is responsible for 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to, I think this was Paul Hawken, and we'll get to Paul Hawken at the next slide. There we are. I was able to go listen to Paul Hawken last year before he released this monumental piece of work called Drawdown. How many of you have heard anything about this? I just got a copy of the book, and what it is, it's a compilation of his top 100 techniques for drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere and mitigating climate change. And he's assembled a team of geeks and wonks of one kind or another in various sectors, and food systems was a big one. And this is how he conceptualized how it all fits together. He has a lot of this stuff on the website, on the Drawdown website, which is really interesting, and a lot of facts and figures. And he estimates in each of these things, so the food system, he has a lot of separate, each of those little boxes has a bunch of different ideas in it. And he has one whole section devoted to regenerative agriculture and its potential. And each of these sections has like an estimate of how much CO2 could be reduced, could be taken out of the atmosphere by this particular technique. He has an estimate of how much it would cost to do this. And he has an estimate of how much it would save to do this. So in the case of regenerative agriculture, his ranking, he gives it a rank of number 11 in the climate drawdown top 100. He says that it has a potential to reduce carbon dioxide to the tune of 23.15 gigatons, costing about 57.2 billion. I'm not sure how he gets this, because, you know, it seems like this kind of agriculture would be a net gain of financially, but he says that it's saving 1.93 trillion. So, you know, he does give a little bit of credit to organic, and I had a little bit of a conversation with him, and he said, "Oh, organic isn't regenerative at all." You know, I've seen those fields in California, and they're, you know, monocultures, and I'm like, "Oh no, not you too." But the point actually I made this point to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I didn't think of that." One of the defining characteristics of organic requirements and standards, and has been since the beginning, is no nitrate, no synthetic nitrate, no synthetic nitrate, no synthetic fertilizers at all. That can be a controversial thing, but because, well, that I could get into the weeds on, well, what do we mean by synthetic anyway? But I'll leave that to a few other people to worry about. But the thing of it is that if we were to really convert more and more acres to organic, even if it's tilled organic, even if it's industrial organic, which a lot of people like to knock, but which is still, you know, Rodale Institute showed that even tilled organic systems are superior in terms of carbon storing capability, i.e. soil organic matter accumulation, than no-till GMO. Okay, and this is one of the ways in which We'll get it. We might get into this tomorrow a bit. Not tomorrow, later today. This is going to be today. We have, Monsanto claiming to be the sustainable agriculture company because they're promoting this GMO and Roundup system, and now dicamba, God help us, system to keep farmers from having to cultivate or to till the soil so they can plant their seeds directly into this dead stuff, and then don't have to worry about weeds except for the resistant super weeds and whatever. But at any rate, that's one of the interesting things, that the fact is that what the glyphosate does is it kills the soil biology, and glyphosate itself is, like all herbicides, is a form of antibiotic. And what does antibiotic do? It kills microbiology, right? That's what it does in your gut, by the way, when you eat it, and we're all eating it if we're eating any kind of non-organic grain crop of any kind. So just be aware. So that is, the nitrogen fertilizer, of course, the fact that there's no GMOs and we're not applying toxic things to the soil. The soil really, the carbon storing capacity of the soil really is a function of its living portion. And I can't stress that enough. That is what regeneration is all about. This has been my passion from, the first time I read Sir Albert Howard in 1974, that soil is where it's at. And the more I learn, the more amazed I am. The soil fungi that hold it all together, and that tillage disrupts. So tilled organic isn't great. Tilling the soil isn't great. The more you can keep the soil covered, the better it is, and the more carbon it'll store. But there was just another study released by the Organic Center, which is affiliated with the Organic Trade Association. They did a study with Northeastern University that I know I copied this one. Yeah, they did a study that measured. They took soil samples and they recruited farmers as citizen scientists to, sample the soil in their different fields. 659 organic soil samples from 39 states, and compared it with 728 conventional soil samples from all 48 contiguous states. And it found that in all cases, the organic soils, which came from industrial organic, came from regenerative organic, whatever you want to call it, they're all different kinds of ecosystems and soil types and so forth and so on. On average, organic soils did better on soil organic matter, overall 13% higher, 150% more fulvic acid, 44% more humic acid. These are the compounds, the fractions of humus, of soil humus, that are most stable and that most allow the long-term sequestration of carbon. So they determined, and I don't know what assumptions they used to make this determination, but they determined that 26%, they had the organic soil samples taken in an aggregate had 26% greater potential for long-term carbon storage. And that's a big deal. I mean, this is not even coming close to the full potential of carbon storage in the soil, which can be huge. And there there are differences certainly in different ecosystems. Tropical soils tend to have very low organic matter because really most of their organic matter is still alive. It's usually in the canopy of the forest. So cutting down tropical rainforests should be a crime on that level. So what else can I say? Well, what is to be done? Oh, this is just another graphic I found that illustrates that half that's about the agricultural, the non-food related agricultural inputs side of things. So it just gives a kind of overview of how these different things contribute. Livestock is another one of those things that's a bit controversial. And there's a lot of people running around saying, well, the best way to address climate change is to go vegan because livestock are killing, they emit a lot of methane, and because large-scale CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, depend on a lot of grain, which is also usually not organic. I mean, there are some people who think that there is such a thing as an organic CAFO, but I beg to differ. I don't think that's the case. But there are on the other side of things, are people like Allan Savory. How many of you have heard about Allan Savory at all? Okay. Allan Savory, I studied a bit with him, his system called holistic management, and he is very persuasive on the subject of how you actually build soil and how the action of ruminant livestock has co-evolved with grassland, and that grass-fed grassland is really dependent on livestock being able to cycle through. And he has this whole theory about how that works that's based on his work as a wildlife biologist in what is now Zimbabwe. And he's got a lot of adherents and a lot of people working with that, and in fact the whole regenerative concept is tied in with that idea. Now, certainly CAFO style grain-fed, grain-finished livestock are a decided minus on many fronts, not just climate change, but health and water pollution and you name it. But the integration of livestock into food, grain or vegetable crops or any other cropping system is really almost ecologically essential. And in fact, it is very difficult, and I know that there are people who have argued for even vegan agriculture and not using manure and so forth and so on. And in the course I've been teaching at Green Mountain College, I've been teaching theory and practice of sustainable agriculture, and I always include a section of the book by Simon Fairley called oh God, now I'm going to forget the title of the book.
Meet the Benign Extravagance.
Thank you. Meet the Benign Extravagance, in which he goes into great depth and many excellent calculations about what it would look like to remove livestock from agriculture in the UK, which is where he's based, and determined that it would be a real ecological disaster, basically, to do so. And he is a former, I think he might have been a vegan, but he was a vegetarian, and he decided that it was the ecologically better thing to do to include some meat in your diet. And so that idea that, yeah, we need some meat, not the level to which the U.S. food system pushes it. We could get into the variations on diet philosophies in another time, but that's where I stand on it anyway. And so, how organic farming can save the world. So this is the thing, that even industrial organic is better on carbon sequestration, is completely better on synthetic fertilizers, certainly on petrochemicals of all other kinds as well, although plastic seems to play too great a role in organic farming in many places, especially in colder climates. But so even the less than ideal, even the less than optimum is still better than what most of the rest of the food system is doing, and will get us there faster. Right now, we only have 1% with all of the growth of organic, you know, and all of the ballyhooed increase in the organic marketplace. We still only have 1% of U.S. farmland under organic management. I understand Ohio has been leaping ahead in organic farming endeavors, and that's great to see. And, you know, at the rate we're going, you know, we'll all be dead, and the climate deniers will be swimming along with the rest of us. So I think that this people are beginning to understand, or beginning to realize it. I mean, even at the Paris climate talks, there was a pretty strong contingent of the European, International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements, or IFOAM. We just love our acronyms. And they successfully got, I mean, France backed this 4 per 1,000 for the climate, and I'm still not exactly sure what that means, but I don't have the graphic in the slideshow, but I did find a graphic that purports to explain what that is all about. On here it is. So, so this graphic is from the Regeneration International site, and it says that there's 4.3 billion tons of carbon coming out, increases by the concentration in the atmosphere increases by 4.3 billion tons per year. The world's soils contain I'm not sure what that means, 500 billion tons of carbon in the form of organic matter, 1,500, that's weird spacing. And if we increase by 4%, 0.4%, 4 per thousand is what they're talking about, a year, the quantity of carbon contained in soils. So 0.4% of increase in soil organic matter every year, we can halt the annual increase of CO2 in the atmosphere. We can basically offset all of the current production of CO2 going off into the atmosphere. That's pretty interesting. I'm not sure what basis they use to measure that, whether they're just looking at agricultural soils or soil in general. That's still kind of a tall order, but if you kind of extrapolate that to Well, we could increase, half of the agricultural soil by 2% or 1% a year. That would be difficult to do, but I know people who have done it. We need to do more in terms of things like composting, food scrap recycling. In Vermont, there is now a law that by 2020 there will be 0 organic matter permitted in we only have 1 landfill in the whole state, and we're not going to allow any more organic materials to go into that landfill in another couple of years. And so figuring out how to divert it to various other uses is a big thing. And of course, all the carbon and the methane released from landfills, as many of you probably realize, that's another one of those sources of methane going up into the atmosphere, which, as you know, is another more potent than carbon dioxide greenhouse forcer. So there's much more besides just soil that is important about this, and that's one of the things that I think we need to understand, that soil is incredibly important, but it's not the only thing, and it's all related to that, and it is all connected. It is all intersectional, whether it's the politics and the food justice aspect of it, or the climate. I'm working on a course actually for the social ecology program that will connect food justice and climate justice and show those connections. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So where are we at here? I think I might have one more slide. Oh yeah. Oh, this one I think needs to be on the internet. Is that possible?
I think it should be.
So this is a video that was done by iPhone, and it's about 4 minutes long, and it's a great little promo and a summary of most of what I've just said. So,
grow food, fight climate change.
Works.
The current food system is responsible for at least 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, second only to the energy sector.
So, what is causing this?
We burn fossil fuels when producing and transporting synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. When put to use, these substances cause substantial harm to people and the planet.
The World Health Organization estimates that there are 3 million cases of pesticide poisoning each year and up to 220,000 deaths. The IPCC estimates that for every 100 kilograms of nitrogen fertilizer applied to soil, 1 kilogram ends up in the atmosphere as nitrous oxide, a gas that is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide.
What's more, chemical farming is destroying our soils, a strong but silent ally in tackling climate change.
To reduce the impact agriculture has on our environment, we have to change the way we farm and grow food. We need to switch to organic agriculture, a climate-friendly production system that sustains the health of soils, ecosystems, and people.
The FAO calculated that CO2 emissions per hectare of organic agriculture systems are 48 to 66% lower than conventional systems.
Organic farming practices use inputs that lead to less greenhouse gas emissions and are beneficial to soils. Carbon-rich soils promote food production, have a higher water holding capacity, and enhance biodiversity.
In fact, healthy soils are our secret weapon in fighting climate change. They have the potential to become powerful, carbon-consuming sinks.
By switching to organic agriculture, we can grow healthy food and fight climate change.
For more information, please visit our website.
There you have it. I think that's the end of my slides, but I think that, let's see, I have a few other suggestions or ideas about what needs to be done. You know, I mean, in terms of promoting organic farming, well, it's not just enough to vote with our checkbooks or our wallets. We need to vote with our votes, as Michael Pollan has said. I even saw a video of Michael Pollan actually saying it's time to talk about agriculture and climate change. Yes, finally. And it's also important to talk about adaptation strategies because, you know, the worst case scenarios are coming at us frightfully quickly, as many people I'm sure are aware. And there's nothing that is more important than local adaptation and local resilience, local climate resilience, local food resilience, local water resilience, local energy resilience. As much as possible, the subsistence, the needs for bare subsistence need to be provided as close to home as possible. That's, you know, the bottom line, if you will, of all of this. That we all need to be producers in some way, shape, or form, whether it's directly in the soil, which, by the way, is the most healing thing that I do. I mean, really, when I was asked about what is it I do to maintain my own sanity and equanimity and all of this, I mean, there's a few things, but one of them is just being in contact with soil. And I think that there's a lot of evidence from the medical literature that that's true. But self-provisioning and mutual aid and working together are all important things. On the policy level, there are farms beginning to get carbon credits. There's the Marin Carbon Project in California, which has probably gone up in smoke by now. You know, I guess Marin County hasn't been as badly hit as Napa, but it's, you know, farmers who are spreading compost on their rangeland and getting actual rebates from the government. I'm not sure how that works, but in California they have such a program. And there's a lot of people talking about things like changing farm subsidies to support ecosystem services as opposed to commodity production, which anybody who has studied farm policy understands has been the downfall of American agriculture. And that's a whole other question. And that, you know, that 4 per 1,000 for the planet idea that was actually adopted at the Paris climate talks, well, it would be nice. Let's get going on it. I'm sure that you guys can come up with some other ideas that would help. I mean, there's always ways that you can help. And that's all I have to say. I would love to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. We have time for a few questions if anyone in the audience would like to respond with a question. Ask a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. How much faith do you have in the system within the USDA to say that when we go into our local grocery store and buy something with the USDA organic label on it, that we're actually getting organic food? A lot of faith. I mean, there are gaps in the system, and it's still a relatively new program, and it has been given relatively low resources compared to the level of, you know, the size of the industry that is grown. So, I think that there's been a lot of publicity about the cases of fraud, and some of them have been quite serious, the grain piece. But in general, I mean, I still do some organic inspection work, and the people I work for are sometimes the finger gets pointed at them as the big bad, cheater guys than the industrial promoters. But boy, they are really pretty tough on the clients. I also do some internal audits, which are required of all the certifiers every year, really, and they get pretty heavily scrutinized by USDA that they're doing things right. Again, most of the enforcement really depends on complaints coming from the industry or from consumers. So it is not without weaknesses, but I would say that, I don't know what a percentage would be, but certainly well up in the 90s. You can trust it. As with any other food situation, the less processing, the less additives, the less ingredients, the less complicated a recipe it is, the more whole foods you can consume, the better off you are, and the less likely there is to be a fraudulent thing. Like that, those fraudulent grains were largely, pretty much all destined for feed grains. So if you're eating whole grains, you're not going to be in much danger of getting that fraudulent stuff. So I hope that answered your question.
One more question? Go ahead.
Do you, in Vermont, are there any programs that you know of that are helping to encourage young people to get into farming? Are there internships, or are there schools that are teaching the next generation? Just because it seems like that's a pretty major problem.
Yeah, I think there's a number of dimensions to that problem, and there's certainly some schools like Green Mountain College and Sterling has become much more in the forefront of that. But there's the National Young Farmers Coalition. There are organizations, NGOs, programs, etc. But the real obstacles to people getting into farming are serious and severe, including, access to land, and access to land for young farmers, access to land for farmers of color is a serious and problematic thing. That the hedge funds are getting into speculating with farmland because that's what's valuable now. So it's not an easy one.
Okay, well, thank you again, Grace.
Thank you.
And